Majority of Gen Z have an unfavorable impression of Israel. And my friends, I think the reason for that is that we're losing the digital war. And we have to figure out a way to win the digital battle.
I'm gonna make an MP3 out of that, and we'll put it up
for you. Yes,
at the website.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, this thing just whipped up a Bollywood hit about by Cash Patel very quickly.
What?
AI.
Oh really?
The Holla Brother I just made on.
Oh okay. Okay, so Michael Schellenberger, who's done a lot of great, he's here to. He's figured out that, they keep saying that the oceans are rising, and I keep saying, well, if they really believe the oceans are rising, why do the people who keep telling me that keep buying beachfront property? So, meaning people like Jeff Bezos, people like Barack Obama, people like John Kerry, Bill Gates. Why do all those people keep buying beachfront property if they really think the oceans are rising? Well, Michael Schellenberg is here to let you know that scientists for years said that they had proof that climate change was accelerating sea level rise, but that's not what the evidence actually shows. They knew the truth and misled the public. And now he has a long email exchange with top scientists that show that what they did, it's a massive scandal. Let's listen to what he says.
Hey everyone, it's Mike Schellenberger for Public. For years, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, has claimed that human-caused climate change has accelerated sea level rise. But that claim is false. There is no scientific evidence of accelerated sea level rise since the mid-19th century. As such, there is no evidence that human-created emissions have caused an acceleration in recent decades. Now, that does not mean that climate change isn't happening. It is. It simply means that it has not caused the sea level to rise at a rate any higher than one would expect without human-caused climate change.
That also means that the Earth has been way warmer for way longer periods than it is right now. In fact, we're at the end of a cooling phase.
We're at the end of an ice age, as a matter of fact.
Right.
We've been in an ice age this whole time because it's normally not frozen.
That's right.
And the ice is coming back, according to NASA.
According to NASA, there's more ice at the Antarctic than there has been in forever. And guess what? So it's been way warmer, way longer, and there weren't ice caps on the Earth for most of the Earth's history. Did you know that? That's a recent phenomenon to have ice caps. So the Earth has been much warmer way before we started burning fossil fuels. So is the Earth warming right now? It is. Is that normal? I'm going to say yes, but I'm not a climate scientist, but I can read studies about it, which I've done, and they all show that people say, oh, well, since 1850, this is the hottest year on... Since 1850? You know the world is 4 billion years old, right?
No, it's like 6 days.
So, yeah, it's real easy when you go back from 1850 to cherry pick data, okay? Again, the Earth has been way warmer. The Washington Post even covered this. Remember that? Malcolm, if you could find that Washington Post headline, that'd be fantastic.
None of the predictions have come true. Here's the bottom line. All the predictions that I heard that made me feel scared, not one of them has come to pass.
Not one of them. They said
have a worse track record than Bible beaters.
They said there's going to be no ice in the Arctic in the summer. They said that the sea level is going to rise and Florida's going to be underwater and all this stuff. None of it happened. None of it. So anyway, he's got more to say.
Not only that, but the top scientists know this fact and have deliberately misrepresented it for years.
Wow. So scientists, turns out you can buy a scientist as easy as it is to buy a politician. Isn't that something? And the scientists
own the science.
And the science.
Remember the WEF?
Yeah, and the scientists know better, and he figured it out.
Deceiving the public. In September, I reported on one of the first global studies of sea level rise that used tide gauge data, which is the only real-world data that goes back long enough to the mid-19th century that would allow one to detect whether sea level rise had accelerated, decelerated, or remained steady. Since then, I have exchanged over 50 emails with one of the world's leading sea level rise scientists, Robert Kopp of Rutgers University, and heard back from IPCC, NASA, and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. What I have learned shocked me. For years, the world's top scientists have known that they cannot prove there has been an acceleration of sea level rise, and yet they have told the public that they can. Not only that, in the process of this exchange, I gained a glimpse into...
It's kind of like how they told you the vaccine would stop transmission and contraction. and that if you got your vaccine, you didn't have to worry about getting COVID. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like they told you how 6-foot social distancing would keep you from getting COVID. It's kind of like that. They just made it up and they were lying about it. It's kind of like what they told you about masks, that if you wore a mask that had holes in it larger than the virus, somehow it was still going to stop the virus. It's like how they lied to you about where the herd immunity, and they lied to you about natural immunity, how they lied to you about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, how they lied to you about school lockdowns and children being vulnerable to COVID. It's how they lied to you about where the virus came from and who funded the making of it and who created it. And it's like they lied about it. And now you're telling me that the climate scientists are lying just like the other scientists when it came to COVID and the pandemic? I'm shocked. But yes, that's what he's saying.
How the scientists have been able to mislead journalists, policymakers, and the wider public for so long. Now, you might think that this is either old news or unimportant. Some climate scientists in years past have pointed out that the real-world data do not support claims of acceleration. And in recent years, a supposed increase in natural disasters from climate change has eclipsed sea level rise in terms of attention-grabbing headlines. But sea level rise has, since the 1990s, been the main justification for apocalyptic climate change claims, and past efforts to debunk sea level rise have failed to show how the scientists were being deliberately misleading. The media and others have published terrifying maps of the future showing cities underwater. Accelerated sea level rise is one of the main justifications for predicting very high costs for adapting to climate change. And while good scientists have debunked acceleration claims in the past, they did not clearly show how IPCC scientists engaged in their manipulations. Not only can I prove to you that the real-world data do not support the claims that there has been an acceleration, I can show that the scientists deliberately misrepresented the research and how they did it, thanks to my on-the-record email conversation with Robert Kopp of Rutgers University. Scientists engaged in multiple forms of manipulation. First, they introduced modeling that, depending on the assumptions, could show deceleration, linearity, or acceleration. Moreover, given that we have over 150 years of real-world tide gauge data, they didn't need to use such complicated modeling in the first place. Second, they used alternative...
So he's saying, just like Big Pharma can rig studies, because only the studies that get paid for come from Big Pharma or from Dr. Fauci. So just like they can rig a scientific study, say about ivermectin or masks or the vaccine or anything, just like they can rig those, which they did. He's saying that they used a flawed way to figure this out. They could have used the data, the tide gauge data, which is a better gauge of sea rise. They didn't use that. They developed this other thing that they can manipulate. That's what he's saying. Okay.
And indirect measures to tide gauge data of sea level rise, whose presentation they manipulated to show acceleration. A tide gauge is just what it sounds like, an instrument to measure sea level rise. Third, they use data from periods of time that are far too short to detect a long-term trend. Sometimes scientists point to satellite data that show acceleration over the last 30 years, but that's far too short of a period of time to show a long-term trend. Proof of that is that the period from the 1920s to the 1950s, before there were significant human-caused greenhouse gas emissions, had comparable levels of acceleration. What you'll see in my exchange with Kopp is that he points to models, alternative data, and short-term data to imply that they support his claim of acceleration. His behavior and our emails make clear that he understands perfectly well that he does not have the scientific evidence to claim an acceleration. And so Kopp uses irrational tactics, including non sequiturs or statements that do not follow logically, credentialism or appeals to his authority as a scientist who knows more, and ad hominem attacks, namely criticisms and insults, all aimed at derailing our conversation and distracting attention from the central fact that there is no real-world scientific evidence to support his claim of acceleration. The result is, I believe, more than a damning indictment of Kopp and the other sea-level scientists. It is also a fascinating look into how political activists posing as scientists can use rhetoric and bullying to maintain their deception over time. I will be the first to tell you that Kopp knows far more about this topic than I ever will, but all of his knowledge can't get around the fact that he does not have the scientific evidence to make his claim of acceleration. A fox knows many things, the old saying goes, but a hedgehog, which is like a porcupine, knows one big thing, and he is the fox. He knows many, many more things than I do, but I know one big thing. The only reliable long-term real-world data is tide gauge data, and they do not show an acceleration. But as you'll see, I now know more than that. I also know how he used his abundant knowledge to deceive the public. Between September 2nd and 4th, Kopp and I sent over 24 emails to each other. The entire exchange was on the record, and I am making the entire exchange public here. I'm not redacting Kopp's email address simply because he already listed it on his webpage. The emails, by the way, are all in the correct order, even though some of the timestamps are not.
So he goes into it on his Substack about how he caught that guy, and he shows his email exchange. It's like 50 emails, so I'm not going to go through it, but that's his summary of it. And there's a lot of things that are rising faster than sea level. How about Katie Porter's popularity? Even that is rising faster.
To the moon.
The minimum wage is rising faster than sea level. And the minimum wage hasn't been raised since, I don't know, 2007.
Not without a fight.
The quality of life in America rising faster than sea level.
Ooh.
So
sea level lowering?
The climate can only change as quickly as the scientists can orchestrate it to. They're only human. I mean, so I'll tell you what this climate scientist did not study. They didn't study all the purchases of beachfront properties by world political and scientific leaders. I'll tell you that. So the Washington Post found out, even the Washington Post, we've covered this before, but the scientists went back over 485 million years. And what they found out was that the Earth has been warmer than it is now for most of that time. Isn't that interesting? They went back 485 million years, and wild temperature shifts, and that's kind of amazing.
I guess they just wasted everyone's time with a bunch of nonsense for going on how many years now?
So we covered this already. I should link that video. But even the Washington Post, they quoted a study that went back 485 million years, and they found out that there was wild changes in temperature, and that most of those years it was hotter than it is now. So Andrew asks Grok, "Hey, is this true? What Michael Schellenberger is saying?" Grok says, "Yes. Long-term tide gauge data, the most reliable historical record, shows no statistically significant acceleration in global sea level since the mid-19th century, contradicting the IPCC claims of high confidence in human-driven speed-up. Acceleration narratives often lean on shorter satellite records, prone to biases or model assumptions, not robust evidence. Schellenberger's emails with experts like Kopp reveal internal admissions of uncertainty, highlighting how selective messaging has misled the public for decades. For decades. So they're lying to you about climate change. And why do I think they're doing this? They're doing this for control. They're doing this. Why did they lie about COVID? So they can control you. So they can get us living in 15-minute cities. They can lock us down, and they can get us to have a vaccine passport, which then leads to a digital ID, which then leads to social credit scores like they have in China. That's the whole big game. That's the game. So they can control you. They can say, "Hey, you're spending too much carbon data money. So we got to restrict your ability to travel. We got to restrict your ability to buy stuff. We got to restrict your ability to drive your car or heat your house. We got to restrict you." And that's what this is all about. Just so you know, I'm not. Is the Earth warming up right now? Yes, it is. It is. It is. Is it like no other warming we've ever seen? No. In fact, we're actually at a cooling phase. Here, he's got some more to say. Let's listen.
Climate change is an existential threat to civilization and humankind, according to top scientists, journalists, and policymakers. They say that planetary warming caused by human emissions is making forest fires, hurricanes, and floods more frequent, worse, and more widespread. It's reducing Arctic ice and submerging atoll islands, killing the coral on the Great Barrier Reef, and worsening heat waves and reducing crop yields. Former President Biden said climate change is a, quote, existential threat to all of us, and scientists and environmentalists say 1 billion to billions will die from food shortages and other climate change impacts. But those claims are nonsense. Climate change is real, but there was never any scientific evidence that it posed a threat to civilization and humankind. The area of Earth on fire has declined for decades, and what determines whether there are high-intensity fires is forest management and other forms of fire protection. There is no increase in hurricane frequency or intensity, and flood deaths and damages are determined by infrastructure and emergency preparedness. Nearly 90% of atoll islands have either increased in size or stayed the same in recent decades. Arctic ice did not decline from 2000 to 2024 and likely will not decline in coming years. Coral on the Great Barrier Reef is at a 36-year high. Crop yields continue to climb even with higher temperatures, aided in part by greater carbon dioxide. And heat waves were far more worse in the 1930s before significant human emissions. Cold deaths outnumber heat deaths, and heat deaths are easily avoidable with access to air conditioning. The claims that billions will die and that climate change poses an existential risk are thus misinformation, and often, given that many scientists know that they are lying, intentional disinformation. The best available evidence suggests nobody will die from climate change. Now, none of this means we should not worry at all about climate change and humankind's contribution to it. The evidence that human emissions change the climate is overwhelming, and many climate skeptics simply go too far in dismissing rising temperatures and humankind's contribution to them. We have good temperature measures on land and oceans. We have known for over a century that the accumulation of carbon dioxide traps heat, and that has increased by 50% since the pre-industrial periods.
We also know that the increase of carbon dioxide has created a greening of the Earth. So there's more green areas of the Earth the size of the United States than there were 20 years ago. So as carbon rises, you get more plants, you get more trees. What do plants and trees do? That's right, they eat carbon.
But Bill Gates said trees don't help.
And so it's Bill Gates, and they create food. That's what carbon does. So the Earth is actually greener now than it was. Way greener. Way greener. So the whole idea of that this is existential. I'm not a climate alarmist, and that's what people are. And so, and they take this down, and I'm sure most people. I used to be a big worried about climate change. I used to be big rah, let's fight climate change until COVID, and then COVID made me look into everything that I used to accept as true. One of them being climate change, and I find out that they've been lying about the data. Lying about the data. Misinforming you intentionally. What's that?
That's an unusual thing for them.
That's really unusual.
The fact that it is just 0.42% of the Earth's atmosphere by volume does not erase its contribution to warming. And, all else being equal, we should not want any change to average global temperatures since humankind's created agricultural, urban, and environmental systems all function within today's moderate temperature band. But scientists, journalists, and activists have so wildly overstated the claims of climate change that they must at this point be considered lies, given their discrepancy with known scientific facts and highly visible realities. Sea levels have been rising since the mid-19th century, and there is no scientific evidence that their rise has accelerated since emissions grew significantly after World War II, and the scientists who claim otherwise are manipulating their models to show acceleration when those same models can just as easily show deceleration or linearity. But given how clear the data are on climate change's alleged impacts, the claims to the contrary by scientists, journalists, and activists cannot be attributed anymore to ignorance. Moreover, there is strong evidence of deliberate deception. I recently documented how a top sea level rise scientist, Robert Kopp of Rutgers, engages in deception. Unfortunately, he's not the exception. The leading global organization that tracks disasters abruptly and inappropriately changed its methodology after climate expert Roger Pielke Jr. showed that they had declined from 2000 to 2021. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration gave the false impression that disasters that cost over $1 billion were increasing. And then it abruptly ended its billion-dollar disasters database after Pielke showed how it had manipulated the numbers. Because the data clearly show that climate change is not an existential threat, scientists and politicians and journalists have misrepresented every aspect of this issue for almost 3 decades. Carbon emissions are largely flat over the last decade, and there is simply no conceivable way that humankind will produce high enough emissions to meet the wildly high RCP 8.5 scenario upon which most of the alarmist predictions of future climate impacts show. What's more, scientists know this perfectly well, as Pielke and other scientists have documented that abundant natural gas, slower than predicted economic growth, and slower than predicted population growth will all prevent it. Quote, RCP 8.5 is not simply highly unlikely, said Pielke recently, it is falsified, meaning that its emissions trajectory is already well out of step with reality. We showed this conclusively in recent studies, he said. And yet scientists continue to use the alarmist RCP 8.5 model for the simple fact that the other models simply aren't alarmist enough.
So these are climate alarmists, and they're overstating the data. And there is no existential threat from climate change. And you've been lied to, just like you were lied to about Russiagate, lied to about Ukraine, lied to about Syria, lied to about Syria gas attacks, and of course lied to about Joe Biden being sharp and focused. And you were lied to about COVID, everything. You were lied to about vaccines. You were lied to about masks, herd immunity, natural immunity, lockdowns. You were lied to about everything, just like that. So, and here, I want to show you this. Here is this is a big climate alarmist, Jamie Raskin, who is a big Russiagate fabulist, a big liar about COVID and everything. And here he is being asked about the sea level rise around San Francisco. Let's listen to what he says.
Congressman, welcome.
Senator.
Are you aware of the World Climate Declaration? There is no climate emergency. It's signed by now over 1,800 global scientists, professionals.
There is no climate emergency. It was.
Are you aware of that declaration?
I'm not aware of that one. I assume I'm aware. Familiar.
I entered in the record. I'd recommend you read it. I thought one of the
without objection, it will be entered into the record.
Well, I already did it, but we'll enter into this one too. I thought one of the interesting statements in there is the obvious that CO2 is plant food. You want a green planet, you need some CO2. But anyway, you ought to take a look at that. You know, I'm by the way, I'm not a climate change denier. I'm just not a climate change alarmist like you and the chairman. I would call myself a climate change realist. In your testimony, you say, my watery home state of Maryland with more than 7,100 miles of coastline is strikingly vulnerable to the effects of climate change and the rising sea level. So that's one of the biggest alarms of the climate change, folks, is that the sea level will rise and just wipe out coastlines, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
Are you aware of how much the sea level has risen in the Bay of San Francisco since the last glaciation period of, some 12 to 20,000 years ago, which is just a blink of the eye in geologic time. Do you know how much the sea level has risen in the Bay of San Francisco in that time?
So since the last ice age, which was between 12 and 20,000 years ago, which humans lived through, by the way, how much has the sea level risen around San Francisco since the last ice age? Do you know how much? So that would be before we started burning carbon, which just started happening 150 years ago. So how much did the sea rise since then? Without anybody burning carbon, how much did the sea rise around San Francisco without anybody burning carbon? You ready for this?
Do not know that one.
You want to just take a guess?
No, he doesn't want to take a guess.
No, because I'm not guessing very well today, so no.
It's 390 feet. Do you think there's anything mankind could have done to prevent that level sea level rise of 390 feet in just, again, 20,000 years?
Well,
you think there's something we could do about that?
No.
No.
Okay, good. That's the answer. No, there's nothing we could do.
So there's nothing we could do. The sea level has risen 300 and some feet around San Francisco since the last ice age, before humans started burning fossil fuel. Is there anything humans could have done to stop that? No. No. And here's Whitney Webb to tell you what this is really all about.
Why don't they talk about planting trees? Why isn't Bill Gates the largest, private landowner in the U.S. now, planting trees like crazy if he's so worried about carbon dioxide? He poo-poos the whole idea of planting trees as a way to combat climate change. It's just carbon markets and going to electric vehicles and all of this stuff. But electric vehicles necessitates mass mining, and a lot of that mining is in places that use child labor, or it's going to be so environmentally destructive you totally destroy the developing world, which these people on the left supposedly want to protect. You're going to totally destroy the environment. But really, what it's about is controlling how much energy people can use, and if you can control how much energy a household can use, you can control their economic activity. You also control how big their family can get. It's fear driven to get people to accept policies they otherwise wouldn't accept because they're told this cataclysmic event is just down the line. And trust us, again, is the conclusion of that. There's people that agree with the narrative about climate change, and there's people that don't. And I'm not trying to really get in that space when I talk about this stuff. I'm trying to point out that the solutions are coming mostly from Wall Street. And then you have people like Larry Fink of BlackRock and Michael Bloomberg and Mark Carney coming together in something like GFAN saying, why don't we give Wall Street direct control of the IMF and the World Bank for climate change?
Right.
How can anyone on the left that's worried about climate change sign up on that?
Exactly.
They don't know anything about anything. That's how.
That's how, because they don't know anything about anything, just like they don't know any. Talk to somebody who considers themselves a Democratic voter. Ask them about COVID. They don't know anything. No, they know less than Chris Cuomo did when he was at CNN. They know less than Don Lemon does. They know less because at least Chris Cuomo knows that ivermectin actually can treat COVID because he's taking it. What's that?
Because he got injured.
Because he got vaccine injured. And then they prescribed him ivermectin for his vaccine injury. So now you know the rest of the story. So great job by Michael Schellenberger. Great job by Whitey Webb. And don't let him scare you. I'm doing whatever they tell you. I'm doing the exact opposite. Right? And so, hey, why doesn't the government, whenever there's a problem, why does the government always declares war on it? So why doesn't the government just declare war on climate change? And why don't they nuke the South Pole?
I know, because fossil fuels power our war machine.
Oh, but I say we should nuke the South Pole as a warning to the North Pole. Stop melting. Stop melting.
I think you just do that.
Watch your fat red ass, Santa. You're next. Talk about a war on Christmas. You know what I'm saying? Come on.
Santa was buried in Turkey.
Yep. And world governments, they're not killing cows to save the ozone. Just so you know. They're doing that to get control of the food supply and make you eat fake meat. Anyway, there you go. Now you know the rest of the story. Thanks for tuning in and hearing me talk about climate change and give you the skivvy, straight skivvy. Is that a saying? I don't even know.
Skinny?
That's skinny. Did you
The
say
skinny?
skivvy?
Did I say skivvy? I meant skinny. Skivvies are underwear.
Yeah.
If you want to hear my climate change jokes, and I've got plenty of them, you can come see me. I've added second shows in Australia. Then we're going to be in Burbank, California, the day after Thanksgiving. It's the Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. Everybody's off. Come to Flappers in Burbank. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. Also, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, December 6th. And January 11th in Waikiki, Hawaii. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. Over to Steph.
Okay. How can Don Jr. have any faith in the Bureau when we still know nothing about Thomas Crooks? Giraffe, right?
Nothing.
Because
Nothing.
it's not his place to know, and he knows not to ask.
Don't F with the Jimmy or he gets jiggy on yo ass. 10 eternal. Hell yeah, Jimmy. Keep speaking and spitting the truth. Great song. And that's from Dirty. Wanted to say thank you for always speaking the truth, following evidence, and never blowing smoke up my bum. XO, love the song too. Psycho Kitty. Thank you, Psycho. Dr. Dore or Ice Jimmy Wujin. Ice had Jimmy's rap name be Jim MC Vanticus. Thank you. DJ Jimmy, get jiggy, Misha. 10 eternal. Fatouche. These Google searchers are literally proof Israel was involved, but in the end, nothing will happen. So sad. Fatouche. Sounds like Israel set up former Satanist Zachary King's Who Wants to Be Famous test, and Charlie Kirk's former chief of staff passed the test. Check it out.
Okay.
Thank you for that one, Sandra. Back to Jimmy.
What?